President Muhammadu Buhari has described the incessant killings being witnessed in different parts of the country as madness. In a press statement by his spokesperson, Garba Shehu, President Buhari condoled with the relatives of those who lost their lives in the course of several abductions, ambushes, and killings playing out across the country. The president also called for a low-key end of the Muslim fast celebration as a result of the global coronavirus pandemic and appealed to all local leaders to warn their youth against being used to incite and foment violence. Tunde, your views on this?
Well, I don't know. The president's indifference has been commented upon ad nauseum, and people have likened it to Nero fiddling while Rome burns, which is not actually historically accurate. The more accurate story is that Nero actually caused that fire, but let me not digress. What this is reminding me of more is the other emperor of Western Rome, Honorius. President Buhari talking about madness of the killings, seeming or sounding no different to people like you and I sitting here, as if he's not the commander-in-chief. It's quite a detached view to take. Honorius now was the emperor of Western Rome, and to go back to that, the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. What were the factors? Some of them sound a little bit familiar. I hate to say it, but I have to. It sounded a little bit familiar. Mass migration of barbarians, like what we may have witnessed here in Nigeria. The weakening of Roman legions, the centralized government, which was now made the provinces too weak. They should have restructured, as we are clamoring for. We now had to have an emperor of Western Rome and Eastern Rome. The emperor of Western Rome, Honorius, Rome was sacked for the first time. Rome fell. It was an absolute disaster. When they went and told the emperor that Rome has fallen, he was horrified. He had a chicken he had named Rome. And he was like, my chicken, it just ate out of my hands a few moments ago. They said, no, it's the city. The city has fallen. And he heaved a sigh of relief. Oh, thank God, it's just the city of Rome. This is what it sounds like when your president and commander-in-chief is talking about madness, like somebody sitting at home watching TV. He needs to take a more proactive stance. The good thing about the statement that was made, and it wasn't even a direct statement, it was a statement made by Madam Garba Shehu, as usual. The president will not speak to us. So all of these things that we're witnessing, you know the quote of those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. It has all happened before. So to prevent absolute disaster, we need a president who will actually engage and actually care. At the very least, address Nigerians on these issues and stop referring to madness like it's something that is completely out of his hands. If it's out of his hands, then what hope is there for the rest of us? I completely disapprove of this statement that was issued by Garba Shehu, and I wish he didn't even bother.
Dr. Bati?
Okay, this statement was issued in the context of a press release regarding the Eid al-Fitr, which comes up on Wednesday this week. And Shehu Garuba was saying in that statement that the president has said the usual persons who pay homage, traditional homage to the president, should not bother to show up. That was the same thing we saw last year in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so this year, the president says there will be a ceremony, at 9 a.m., Eid al-Fitr prayers in front of the forecourt, at the forecourt of the presidential villa, but that people should keep away. Now, somewhere down the line in that statement, the president was quoted as saying that what is happening in the country with regard to kidnapping and terrorism and banditry is pure madness. I think the president cannot be more correct. It's pure madness. It is surprising. We cannot justify it, considering that this president came to power on the basis of the popular perception that he, being a war veteran, a military general, a soldier, will be able to address the problems. But today, many Nigerians are apologizing that they believe the president too early, but in any case, he won re-election in 2019. So that's why I say, well, if you look at what has been happening, Kangara students, Afaka students, the abduction of students even between Imo and Abia State, and Greenfield students who are still in captivity, and all the cases, repeated cases of assault on human dignity that we have wondered under his watch. Yes, we're tempted to agree with him that it is madness. because only a mad country would condone, allow, live with this kind of situation in which we have found ourselves. However, a few days ago on the same program, I made the statement that the president of Nigeria cannot become a motivational speaker. His main title under the Constitution is that he's president and also commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Nigeria, which means that under the laws of Nigeria that he swore an oath to defend, to protect, he has the cohesive forces of the Nigerian state in his possession. The Nigerian police cannot take any decision except they get express approval from the government. Now, the danger, the tragedy of the Nigerian situation today is that we now have a president who is now appealing, who sounds helpless, who sounds overwhelmed. The other day, the president was appealing to the abductors of the students of the Greenfield University to please release them. The president of Nigeria cannot be sounding as the chief executive of an NGO. This is my own problem, with this particular matter. Now, in this same latest statement that was issued by Garuba Shehu, the president was appealing to local leaders, to talk to their youths, so that they do not sabotage Nigeria. The other day, he was saying that there are criminally minded persons, who just want to sabotage Nigeria. All of us must note that when a president who has the coercive powers of state in his possession, who is the only person who can give express directions to the police, and who can only command the armed forces, and who is also in a position to approach the National Assembly for a declaration of a state of emergency, begins to lament. Lamentations from, my Bible knowledge is not so good.
The Book of Lamentation.
Even if I have, a certificate in Bible knowledge. Now, if the president begins to lament like that, then all of us should know that there's a serious problem in Nigeria. The other day, we were told that truck loads of persons with motorcycles were approaching Abuja. Senators and members of House of Representatives, they started fleeing. These are the people who are supposed to make the policies, make the laws to protect vulnerable people like us, ordinary citizens like us. And then the president has joined that crowd, or the lamentation crowd of Nigeria. So we should be worried indeed. But let's finalize this by saying to the president that he is president and commander-in-chief of Nigeria. He has all the instruments at his disposal to confront the major tragedy that we face. He appealed to the United States to relocate African Command from Stuttgart, Germany, to Africa. Now, the U.S. Defense Department, the Pentagon, they've responded. They say, no, that's not possible. It has cost implications. It has implications for U.S. politics, and the U.S. is interested in its own interests. So how about that?
In other words...
So the president of Nigeria should not be a motivational speaker or a prophet of lamentation.
Okay. In other words, Dr. Bati, like we always say to Oji every morning, take charge. That's the charge this morning. That's all on news headline. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have Rod Sudiri, Michael Wilson, and this one more. Aaron Akejo, let's give us updates on Africa, global business, COVID-19, spotlight activities across the globe. Stay with us. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the morning show right here on the Rise News channel. Let's quickly go straight to Rod Sudiri. Rod, how's it going, my friend? How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, Rufai. Good morning to you. Good morning, Tundu. Good morning, Doctor. Thank God it's Monday. So we kick off. I'm going to start saying that every Monday. We kick off with the SEC. Remember, a few weeks ago, or it was about a month ago, I broke it right here on the morning show that the SEC was going to license online brokerage firms that offer USD stocks, foreign stocks. They've now, Dio Obisan, who is the Commissioner for Operations at the SEC, in an interview, said that there's been a surge of young Nigerians, in fact, a number of Nigerians who have moved into US dollar stocks over the last 18 months, about 400,000 of them. And in fact, the number of Nigerians that actually hold US dollar stocks exceed Nigerians here in the local environment that have collective investment schemes and even mutual funds. So what they're saying is that to avoid exploitation, they want to be able to license these brokerage firms. So you think of, Chaka, Bamboo, Trove, and so on and so forth. They already have existing relationships with a brokerage unit that is licensed with the SEC and also with the SEC in the United States. But they're saying that's not enough because each of these platforms are advertising the ability to buy these stocks overseas. And so they have to step in because according to Mr. Obison, there is exploitation. Now, you have to ask yourself, why is it that so many Nigerians are flocking towards US dollar securities? I found something so interesting. I was online looking up Dio Obison, who used to be a player in the private sector. Here is, you have to listen to this. Here is a lecture that he was giving at the Lagos Business School. Listen to what this was back in July of 2016. I have to emphasize this point. This was a lecture from July 2016 at the Lagos Business School. Here he is talking about foreign exchange. Let's take a listen.
Dollar exchanges now, for an average, there's one, now the parallel market even has an, should I call it informal database called Aboki FX. I only find out, sorry, anyone familiar with that? You know that. On Aboki FX, it is 320, 321. On CBN website, 197. I almost almost got myself jailed because I was doing a transaction for a client a couple of months ago. That's when it was still unclear, 186 or 1 something. So I did a very huge model, six sheets, and everything was based on CBN. Thankfully, I ran it by a superior when I was working in my former company, and that's when I knew that things were not really well.
Now, who would not give their right arm to be able to get FX at 197 or 323? Now, within the context of what we're talking about as to why so many people are flocked over to getting US dollar stocks is purchasing power parity, right? Yeah. What the exchange rates, the decline of the value of the naira over a number of years has pushed them over there. Also, you got to look at the fact that there's not much confidence in the Nigerian in the exchange right now. There are a number of companies, a handful, that control majority of the market. If their stock moves in one direction or the other, they drag the market in that direction, whether it's up or down. That's kind of dangerous. There's also some items, some things that have happened on the market that the regulator has turned a blind eye to. We want more regulation of these stocks and of these insider trading and a whole number of other things that take place on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. There's also the business environment. If the stocks are able to beat foreign exchange depreciation and inflation, those are two things you have to look at when you want to, invest in these stocks for capital appreciation and dividend yield and so on. If they were attractive, more people would invest. In the early 2000s, up until about 2013, Nigerian Stock Exchange was incredibly attractive, and a lot of people were flocking. In fact, if you even Google Dio Obison when he was in the private sector, I saw an interview where he was talking to giving an interview, and this was back in 2013. They were talking about the surge in investment in the local market. So that's changed. There's also the insecurity issues, but chiefly, when you list all these things, FX, inflation, you would want to invest overseas in order to be able to maintain your purchasing power. And so for the players in the sector, this license is not going to be an extra cost for them to have to pay. But then the regulator is saying it's oversight, and that's what we want to do. To Morocco, really quickly, Northern Africa. Acdital is one of the largest North African private sector players. This hospital was famously where that Malian woman gave birth to 9 babies. They are seeking a $170 million expansion outside of Morocco. They are also possibly seeking an IPO, an initial public offering. King Mohammed VII, he has a social insurance scheme where he wants to insure about 37 million people. Morocco has one of the lowest hospital beds to population ratio. It has a population of about 36 million people. So I don't know, maybe they got a lot of fame from that woman giving birth to 9 babies, but they are planning, or maybe it's just a coincidence, but they're planning an expansion. The COVID-19 pandemic has also played a role in having them have to source to expand. So healthcare, I mean, healthcare is still a major talking point across the African continent. And Tundu, I know you had a couple comments when we were speaking about both of these earlier, so I wanted to, I guess, start with you and get your thoughts, Tundu.
Thank you, Reuters. I actually want your thoughts. Do you think this measure from the SEC is more protective than punitive? Because when you look at the demographic that's been targeted, the millennials, 18 to 40 years old, are the ones investing, and they often feel the brunt of hostile government policies. Do you think this is one of them?
Yeah, I think it's more punitive because, again, these players already had a relationship with a broker that's licensed with the SEC and licensed with the SEC in the United States. That relationship was already there, but they're saying it's more about oversight. So I think it's more punitive because this new license will cause all of them to have to pay more for it, which could filter down to the millennials buying stocks in the form of higher fees per transaction.
Well, doesn't this Reuters remind us of that same argument, conversation that we had about the Central Bank of Nigeria, its policy on cryptocurrencies? And at the time, we had made the point that, you know, there are certain policies that are just seemingly, deliberately, you know, put out there to frustrate a vibrant, young Nigerian population that is trying to promote innovation and creativity in fintech and other aspects of the economy. So, well, from a policy perspective, this doesn't look too surprising. But the question is, the Securities and Exchange Commission is saying that it wants to protect Nigerians investing, over 400,000 of them, from exploitation. Who determines that? I guess that from an investor's perspective, the basic principle in law is buyer beware. Right. And, you know, should the state control how people invest their money? What is that popular phrase again? You know, people will follow the money.
Right.
So even if you come up with restrictions for, you know, the relevant, investment agencies in Nigeria, people will still find a way around it. Right. So I do not know, I do not understand why Nigerian agencies will come up with policies, approaches, you know, that do not seem to show that the relevant persons in charge of those agencies try to think first before acting. For me, this is a classical case of acting without acting, because it will be of no effect whatsoever. People will carry their money to wherever they want to be, to use it. And it's not as if investment is tied to citizenship. Right. If you are in Nigeria, how many Nigerians are even holders of dual citizenship? So if you are a dual citizen of Nigeria and the UK, how can the SEC stop you from investing your money, from following the money, from going to where profit is? The big issues that Nigeria has to deal with is the investment environment. And this even goes beyond ease of doing business. We're talking about inflation, double-digit inflation. We're talking about return on investment. Right. My professor at the Said Business School, he said, look, investment is all about return on investment. Correct. So if you are in an environment that cannot give you return on investment, that's not the right investment. Right. You go elsewhere. Right. And there's no government policy that can stop you from doing so.
Correct. Well said. Well
right. I think what has to be stated here is, and sometimes I wonder if these people really go through the process of design thinking before they make all this thought process, because I really shudder with so much indignation at the way they do their thinking process as regards the regulators in this country. Moving on, but for me, the part that we should focus more in, and I'm talking to the regulators here, is they should ask the question, why are people leaving? And you've given the answers. Right. So that should inform your policy formulation. Policies are supposed to be corrective. Right. Why is it that people don't have confidence in the Nigerian business space? We all know the answers. Forex and everything. Government policies. Wasn't it the other day that the Minister of Agriculture said, oh, we're going to shut the borders and throw the key into the water?
Right.
All of a sudden, next thing they say, oh, we're opening the borders. So we don't even know where to go. I think it was Ralph Waldo Emerson that said, what you do speaks so loud, I can't hear what you say.
Right.
And that is what is happening in the business space in Nigeria. You need to fix this. I mean, look at that lecture you played. Oh, the CBN rate was 197. The Aboki effect, which is the reality on ground rate, is 300 and something as of 2016. Right. Today is another kettle of fish entirely. So what are we doing? We're joking. And somebody will have thought that we will go through the design thinking to be able to fix the problem. But the next thing, you put punitive measure, and you said in national interest. Listen, the market doesn't work on sentiments. Exactly. The market doesn't know the color of your passports.
Very true. Very true. Well said.
Thanks, Rotus. All right, we'll move on to Michael Wilson. Michael, great to have you from London this morning.
Morning. Yeah. Basically, the markets are digesting. Sorry, I've got a terrible echo. I'm not quite sure whether you can hear me or not. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you clearly. Please go ahead.
I think that the gallery needs to split mic.
Okay, the gallery needs to do something about your mic, but we can hear you. Please go ahead. Okay.
Well, I've got an echo. I'll do my best. Friday's gigantic non-payroll. This payroll trends by only 400,000 jobs as opposed to 1 million. So we're looking very much like the cave, obviously, with a dash of nation down. Asian stock markets off to a positive start today, but commodities really are the big eye-opener. I'll come to that slightly later on. But it's getting 2%. So basically, whilst the autumn's on payroll continue, Asian is likely to be more focused really on inflation and new loan and US data all this week. The ECB, but it's a non-policy making meeting. So it means that financial markets the ebbs and flows of global recovery sentiment. Asia then sprinting out of the gate this morning and very much what would happen on Wall Street also happened on Friday. If stock markets can get rid of the narrative about the non-performing job figures, then day-to-day nuances will have quite a good one. Big pipeline hack in the United States, US colonial pipeline, they demanded around probably just pushed oil prices slightly higher today, but mainly it's not about the oil price, it's about fine issue. Meanwhile, the government has issued emergency legislation about this, allowing supply to be carried by road across 18 states, which is actually cryptos have had a very he talks about Dogecoin and so on, and its value. He called it. Were very worried about this, and they goes on the television, starts talking about it, and nothing happens. So one of my favourite commentators said this morning: if you're stupid enough to stake a goodly amount of your wealth on juvenile tweets and a comedy show, then you probably deserve everything you get. Bitcoin, by the way, rose again to $58,000 on the fiat US dollar. The technical failure has suggested the correction should be quite low, but a rally through $60,000 will probably do it. No doubt, said my favourite commentator, there will be an announcement from a prominent investment bank. And on cue, Goldman Sachs have just said that they've informed the markets, according to CNBC at least, that they are starting their own cryptocurrency team. Selective onboarding of cryptocurrencies. Basically, what my correspondent says, my commentator says, it's just these big banks following the money, basically. Their clients are saying, we want you to talk about cryptocurrencies, so they do. Another mover this morning, the British pound, actually. Scottish, we've had local election results here, as you probably know. I won't bore you with the details of that, but there is less likelihood of the union actually splitting up, and that's had quite a boost from the SNP, very narrow majority. So we've got a majority, but it seemed apparently less likely that the union will break up. We'll see about that. Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, has been reshuffling his cabinet. Rachel Reeves becomes the new Shadow Chancellor, and she's a former Bank of England official. There's been a lot of infighting and so on. She sort of is not much liked by the big left of the party, but she's called for hefty wealth taxes in the past. Freeport's a big triumph from the UK budget announcement about that. Well, they are not as free as you'd expected. Apparently, the government's been forced to admit that you still will have to pay tariffs for a number of the zones that actually benefit from these. In other words, if you're exporting from them, it's not going to be tariff-free, which is, of course, the original plan for Freeport. So oil then has rallied slightly on those colonial pipeline rows. As I say, it shouldn't really have done. Any excuse for it to rally, basically. It shouldn't have done because it's a refined product issue rather than rather cruder. Gold's impressive rally is actually continued. So really then, I suppose the question this morning, given the rise in copper, given the rise in iron ore, is there going to be a sustained commodity boom? All mined commodities are performing very well. Standout has been iron ore. $200 a ton was passed for the very first time. It was China that drove the original super cycle at the beginning of the millennium. Is that momentum continuing? Not necessarily, say commentators. It's about a weak base effect space. We've seen a lot of these, haven't we? In this, what looks like a big, strong recovery is actually not, because things have been so bad. They're all just gradually getting better. But the upward percentage rise looks rather good. In real terms, probably not a lot. So no super cycle yet, but we do keep our eye on commodities. That's the global view this morning. Right. Very good morning,
Michael, to you. Thank you so much for that insight. I want to talk about the colonial pipeline. I mean, isn't it obvious already that there is an emerging threat from cybersecurity attackers all over the world? Because if some hackers can take over a pipe like that, that can throw America into a turmoil with oil, then isn't there a big problem we're not seeing? They call themselves the Dark Trace anyway, which is the name of another prominent cybersecurity company. And second question is, I mean, I love Milton Friedman. I love helicopter money. I love the fact that you can reflate an economy by putting money in. But the phenomena happening now in America is staggering. A lot of people don't want to work. So there's so many jobs being created now because the economy is opening up, but people don't want to work. There's a story that came out in The Economist last week saying a McDonald's outlet had to pay people $50 to attend a job interview. Attend a job interview, $50 in the first place to attend a job interview. What is happening?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, that's it. And also that may reflect why the new jobs figures were so low on Friday as well. A lot of people are saying that people, you know, on furlough schemes and the rest of it, having money helicoptered into their pockets, are saying, do you know what, we don't need to work, so why should we? That will probably change, I feel. The other thing driving this, and we've talked about this before, are the inflationary pressures of a lot of jobs not necessarily being available, but materials going up in value too. So it's a very mixed picture. I think what you're seeing is a phenomenon, basically a blip. I think that employment is rising in the United States, but you're quite right. If there's no incentive to go to work, then why go to work at all? As far as computer hacks are concerned, yeah, it takes a teenager, doesn't it, somewhere around the world who's probably very good at this. I mean, some companies are actually hiring ex-hackers to protect themselves against cyber attacks and so on. I think it's a particular form of warfare, quite honestly, and we need to be very worried about it. I think that a lot of companies, a lot of small companies, just don't have the resources to protect themselves properly against these kind of hacks. Of course, pipelines. I mean, just think of a utility. Think of a utility anywhere in the world. It's not just about military attacks. That could be hacked as well, which would throw everything into confusion. Imagine if there were a huge attack, for example, on banking systems around the world, the flow of money stopped and so on. So yeah, it's a terrible problem, and it is only now really getting to boardroom level to be discussed.
I wanted to ask about ransomware. You talked about boardroom level. Should it be approached from a diplomatic level? Because there are certain countries that have been fingered as the common culprits here. North Korea, Iran, and Russia. Because also look at what happened with Travelex. There are thousands and thousands of credit card details. Travelex have had to shut down and are using pen and paper at the moment. And they have to pay, is it $6 million to their hackers? So, like you said, it's a huge problem. How should it be addressed? Diplomatically?
I mean, good luck with diplomatic discussions with Putin, with North Korea, with China, and so on. I don't see that happening at all. I feel it's a question of demand. I feel as though the board need to be cognizant of what's going on, and they need to hire people to combat it the same way. I don't think diplomacy is going to work at all. I don't see why it would listen to it.
Okay, Michael, two quick issues. Let's talk about the big boys. Now, Elon Musk was on Saturday Night Live on Saturday, and he had a lot to say about the disclosure that he has Asperger's syndrome, and the Mother's Day gift he was going to give his mother was the Dogecoin. And then they went on later to say Dogecoin will now be available for SpaceX trips. Now, what will be the financial value of a Dogecoin for trips to the outer space? And he's talking about interplanetary commerce. Now, all of this, when you put it together, yes, I guess Saturday Night Live brought him on to whitewash his image. But do you think that at the end of the day, the big issues about his comments with regard to COVID-19, with regard to the LGBTQ community, do you think that that whitewash was successful? A whole load of questions there. And then to go to, what's his name, Jeff Bezos of Amazon. He has been selling off his shares. A few days ago, he sold $5 billion worth of shares. He sold before then another $5 billion worth of shares, $10 billion worth of shares. So what is it? What is this? Is it altruism? Is it, I mean, if you can help us make a sense of it. And finally, Twitter. They have introduced what they call a PayPal tip jar, where people can have an icon on their Twitter account, and they get tips from persons who want to support them. And we're told that journalists are entitled to this. Civil society groups are entitled to this. Well, I was tempted. I looked at the story, but journalists are not allowed to accept that kind of gift, so that there won't be ethical considerations. These are the issues.
Far as Elon Musk's concerned, my advice to him is don't give up your day job. I'm very impressed with him on Saturday night. I saw a bit of it on YouTube. We don't get it particularly like it's not something I would like to watch. And if he's going to talk about crypto travel, well, good luck to him. There are many more questions need to be fixed down here. I think I think he may have been trying to establish himself as a kind of, I'm a real person. Well, he didn't, but he wasn't very good at it. I personally leave that thing to broadcasters. As far as the Twitter and the PayPal and the rest of it, yeah, do these things. As a journalist, you have to be very, very careful about your ethics and so on. We try in our business to do that so that people trust what we're actually saying. It's not a huge job, but I'm very wary of anything to do with anything online, quite honestly.
Hello?
Right, I think it's done speaking. Okay, that's about it. Thank you so much for your time, Michael, as always. For updates on COVID-19 pandemic, Adeso Omora is right here with us. Adeso, great to have you.
Great to be here. Thank you so much, Rufai. Good morning. Good morning, Dr. Abati, and good morning, Tundum.
Good morning.
Well, the coronavirus has unfortunately killed more than 3.3 million people globally and infected 158 million others across the globe. As several countries are turning the corner with the pandemic, others are struggling with new wave of infections, of course driven by new variants and a slow vaccination rollout. Daily numbers of coronavirus in India. India is the country to watch out for. Well, one of the countries to watch out for, as we are seeing spikes in other countries, especially neighboring India. Daily numbers of coronavirus infections in India has fallen below 400,000 for the first time in 5 days. And according to official figures, 366,161 new infections, as well as 3,754 deaths were recorded on Monday. And that's down a little from recent peaks. Now, India's tally infection now stands at 22.6 million infections and 246,116 million deaths. There are fears generally. Scientists are coming out in recent times to say the global pandemic's true infection and fatality figures are undercounted. We just heard from Dr. Anthony Fauci over the weekend as well, talking about the US death rate. But here in Nigeria, the country has recorded 37 new infections in 7 states. Lagos saw 13 new infections, the most in the last 24 hours. And let's take a look at the update on vaccination against COVID-19 in Nigeria. The latest data shows that 1.66 million people in Nigeria have now been inoculated with the first jab of the AstraZeneca, according to the NPHCDA. This updated data shows percentage of targeted population inoculated so far by states. If we could yes, this slide. Now, 1.66 million is still a stretch away from half of the a little above 4 million doses we are told is available in the country. So we may likely see vaccination for first phase continue in some states as others prepare to commence their second dose exercise. You recall, for instance, in Lagos, the state is to commence the second dose exercise on the 28th of this month. Now, for the second year run, you're still talking about Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari has cancelled the traditional Salah homage to the presidential villa by religious, community, and political leaders, of course, due to the global coronavirus crisis. This is a welcome development. The statement was issued yesterday by the presidential spokesperson, Garba Shehu, who says that the president has directed that all Eid al-Fitr celebrations be limited due to COVID-19. He said as a result, the president will not receive visitors during this celebration. The president, the first family, his personal aides, members of cabinet and service chiefs who choose to remain in the nation's capital, Abuja, during this celebration will have to abide by the protocols of the COVID-19 at the forecourt of the presidential villa to observe the Eid prayers. The time fixed for the prayer is 9 a.m. Now, outside of Nigeria, the European Union has not yet renewed its contract for the supply of AstraZeneca vaccines beyond June, and it is not certain it will. Now, the bloc's internal market commissioner, Thierry Breton, said this a day after a new massive contract extension with Pfizer was announced. That extension is to see Pfizer supply 1.8 billion doses from now through to 2023 for the bloc. 2 weeks ago, you will recall that the EU launched legal proceedings against the pharmaceutical group AstraZeneca for allegedly failing to respect the terms of its contracts. Now, this is a development that French President Emmanuel Macron is welcoming. He says the decision from the European Union not to renew the order of the AstraZeneca vaccine is brilliant. President Macron says the EU policy is aiming at responding in particular to variants. He is saying that some other vaccines are more efficient. I don't know if the WHO and scientists will agree with this stand, but as President Macron tries to suggest that the AstraZeneca is less efficient, across the channel, Britain has made the AstraZeneca vaccine the centerpiece of its successful vaccination campaign. And finally, this morning, a WHO scientist has said a COVID-19 variant spreading in India is more contagious, and it is feared it could be dodging some vaccine protection, which is contributing to the spike and spiraling out of control situation we are seeing in India. Somaya Swaminathan, an Indian pediatrician and clinical scientist, she's warning that the epidemiological features of the B1617 variant indicates it is an extremely rapidly spreading variant. In the UK on Friday, the strain has been declared a variant of concern by Public Health England.
So what do we say about India at this point? Less than 3% of India is vaccinated, and you now have this particularly virulent strain. Look at what's happening in Seychelles. Seychelles was the most vaccinated country in the world. I mean, they have a really tiny population, but in terms of percentage, they were approaching 70%. Mm-hmm. But now their COVID cases have surged past India's per capita, obviously, because I do need to stress the population of Seychelles is around 100,000 people, but per capita, in a country like Seychelles, 7,000 COVID cases recently is gargantuan. Mm-hmm. But they were vaccinated. They got the Sinopharm jabs and then AstraZeneca. So what does that say about the efficacy, long-term, of the vaccines, efficacy against these new strains? It's all very worrying. As for President Buhari's comments about the sort of scaled down Eid celebrations, I was saving my thoughts on that for your segment so I don't repeat myself. Mm-hmm. That part of his message was good, and I hope that other people follow that example and scale things all the way down. We must not be complacent. The Emir of Katsina and President Buhari are reading from the same playbook, because the Emir of Katsina has announced he does not want people coming to visit him.
Well, India, to start with, India. Somaya Swaminathan is the chief scientist in India. And our point is about this variant of concern as described by the United Kingdom, the B.1, .617 variant. And she raised the alarm that this is a mutant variant. It keeps mutating. And although I'd had some other people making the comment that, you know, a virus can mutate until it reaches its own end and cancels itself out. But what is interesting in her comment is that she's saying that that is not the case. And that is, in fact, what poses the threat to the entire global community. Because this mutant virus can just continue to replicate itself. And that will put a lie to every effort with regard to vaccine development and also to vaccination. But she made a more interesting point that we had always made on this particular program, which is that it even goes beyond having a vaccine of interest or a vaccine of concern. That the bigger problem is that the people of India, the government has not shown leadership. They've conducted elections in 5 districts. People are also not observing the basic protocols, right? She also made that point. And that religious gatherings, festivals are still allowed to take place. And that is the big problem that India faces. But if we go beyond all of that, beyond the Kumbh Mela, and all those religious festivals, we should raise the point about lessons that the rest of the world can learn from India, because that is very important. Now, to come to Nigeria, President Buhari saying, well, just keep away, keep off,
from a distance,
don't come and pay homage. That was the same protocol that was adopted last year at the peak of the coronavirus pandemic. Now, okay, people will stay at the forecourt. The forecourt is just directly in front of the presidential villa, and it's a lot of space, plenty of lush green and all of that, where we hope that when they hold the prayers at 9 a.m. on Wednesday at that particular venue, that the relevant officials, starting from Chief of Staff and PAMSEC State House, will ensure that basic protocols are observed. Otherwise, we will come here on Thursday and we'll say, okay, the president said he didn't want people to pay homage, but even what they did at the forecourt violated basic protocols as defined, by the relevant departments of government. Now, paying homage, yeah, that's a traditional thing in the villa. The FCT minister will lead religious and community leaders and local leaders. They will come and then they will all sit inside the villa, from the red room to the main reception room, and food will be served and everybody will be shaking hands. And at the end, the president will stand at the red carpet room, it is called, and he will shake everybody's hands. The implication is that this time around, people will not have the opportunity to shake hands with the president and take photographs with him. They left out the State House Media Corps. The State House Media Group also, that's one opportunity for any State House correspondent to take pictures with the president. But all of us must understand that we live in peculiar times, yes, and that, you cannot insist on the old tradition. There's a new normal. Part of that new normal is the president of Nigeria and his family protecting themselves with contact with persons who may in fact be vaccine hesitant and who may not in fact have taken the vaccine. As for President Macron, this running battle between Europe and AstraZeneca. So whatever decision they have taken is not unexpected. And in any case, they're going to court, I think next week, or is it 2 weeks, over the failure of AstraZeneca to meet its supply obligations.
And then very quickly to Tundu's points about the efficacy of the vaccines that we have. So we know there's what we call breakthrough infections, meaning that those who have even been vaccinated can still be infected. That is why the message now is that the vaccines are good, but they're not the only way out. So despite having vaccinations, we must also keep those non-pharmaceutical protocols in place. And you see that a lot of countries that are vaccinated are now relaxing measures, which doesn't seem like an ideal idea just yet, as we have more variants across the globe.
Thank you,
and that's why we should take a very big cane and flog the nation of Israel as regards relaxing measures. They have thrown caution to the wind. It's mayhem now in Israel, and it's only a matter of time because they feel they have gotten to a certain threshold with vaccination. They had a big religious festival. And you see, the funny thing is, religion always plays a role in all of this. So I don't get it. Amidst all of this, that you're having big religious festival because a sizable part of the population in Israel has been vaccinated. That even led to the stampede and death of a couple of people. Viruses don't mutate except people allow them to mutate.
Yeah.
So it's mutating because it's leaving your body and going to the other person's body because they're not protecting themselves, and it's mutating. So it's taking variation through its spike protein from your body and mutating through you and getting into the other person. So you are the co-mutatant, if I could use that word. You are the one ensuring that that virus you're the host. You're the one ensuring that the virus gets the capacity to mutate. If you do what's right, if you wear a face mask, if you observe social distancing, if you don't get in a crowded environment where the virus can move around, the virus will not mutate. Why has coronavirus mutated and we can't stop it all this while? It's because a lot of people have not taken vaccination because of the ineptitude of leadership, and at the same time, they are violating all the laws. They are moving around. They are giving themselves as a host for the virus to mutate, and it's spreading around, and they're spreading it to other people. So coronavirus doesn't just mutate, people make it mutate. And that's the lesson we should pass out there. That's why you should still wear your face mask, do all the pharmaceutical methods, and please protect yourself. Speaking of leadership, France, Germany have shown very, very indecisive leadership in all of this. And I think they should go back and take lessons from countries like Taiwan, from countries like New Zealand, how they've been able to battle this. Because when you're indecisive, you'll not be able to do your logistics properly, you'll not be able to get your vaccines out, and you'll stop blaming people. France is just trying to put the blame of AstraZeneca. They've got many options. How about France? I thought France, from day one, would have invested some money in Sanofi. Isn't Sanofi in the vaccine race? Why hasn't Sanofi, a French-based pharmaceutical company, brought out their own vaccine? Why did France not invest in Sanofi from day one? I mean, Americans invested in Moderna from day one. Even before vaccines were out, $400 million in Moderna and some other companies. So now they're blaming AstraZeneca and they're acting all pretty now. And you can see the cases surging in France, surging in Germany. Leadership, lessons need to be learned. But most importantly, the lesson we should learn is behavioral change. I know it's very difficult. We need to move around. We are social people. But this is not the time for that. It's a case of pandemic. The virus will not mutate except you make it mutate.
Well, meanwhile, in Spain, on Saturday, Spain decided to lift the state of national emergency declared over COVID after 6 months, and people trooped out. They were celebrating, they were shouting freedom, freedom. Now they ran to the beaches, they've been celebrating. And I think there's also a lesson from there. Okay, is Spain lifting the restrictions too early? Could Spain have been a bit more careful? You know, at a time when in other European countries, we see, you know, a surge. And in other parts of the world, we see a third wave of the pandemic. Now, to go back to India, yes. I thought I heard you saying that the figure is above 300,000. Yes. No, it's worse.
It's below 400,000.
No, it's worse. On Sunday, the figure was 403,378. So consistently for about 2 weeks, you have had a situation in India where the figures have been climbing. Over 22 million infection rates, over 400,000, 240,000 deaths. So, and I think that's why the chief scientist, Swaminathan, was making the point that, look, this is a problem for the entire world. And it's the justification for the cry that the rest of the world must come to the rescue of India. India, 1.3 million billion plus population, has only been able to vaccinate about 1.7% of its population. And that's the country that is the largest producer of vaccines in the world. If good Ross, what will Ion do?
I mean, you can say that again, Dr.